Vienna, 1791. In a modest apartment, a 35-year-old man works feverishly on his final masterpiece, racing against death itself. This musical genius, born Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, would die before completing his requiem, leaving behind not just an unfinished masterpiece, but a legacy that would forever define what it means to be a prodigy. At age 3, while most children struggled to form sentences, Mozart was already playing the harpsichord. By 5, he was composing music. By 6, he was performing for European royalty. His mind could hear entire symphonies before writing a single note, composing complex pieces with seemingly effortless brilliance. Yet behind the musical miracle lived a man of contradictions. The composer whose works exuded elegance and sophistication was also known for his crude humor and financial struggles. The child prodigy who captivated Europe's elite would die nearly penniless, buried in an unmarked grave. How could someone create over 600 works of transcendent beauty in just 35 years? What drove this extraordinary mind to push musical boundaries while his own life spiraled into chaos? And why does his music still move us to tears more than 2 centuries later? This is the story of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, the composer who lived briefly but whose music achieved immortality. A man whose genius continues to haunt us with a simple question: how can such divine music come from a mere mortal? Early life. Family and childhood. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was born on January 27, 1756, to Leopold Mozart and Anna Maria Pertl at Getreidegasse 9 in Salzburg. At the time, Salzburg was the capital of the Archbishopric of Salzburg, an ecclesiastical principality within the Holy Roman Empire, now part of Austria. He was the youngest of 7 children, though only he and his elder sister, Maria Anna Nannerl Mozart, survived infancy. The day after his birth, Mozart was baptized at St. Rupert's Cathedral in Salzburg. His baptismal record lists his name in Latin as Jonas Chrysostomus Wolfgangus Theophilus Mozart. As an adult, however, he preferred the name Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, though he used multiple variations throughout his life. Mozart's father, Leopold, was originally from Augsburg, an imperial free city of the Holy Roman Empire. A skilled violinist, composer, and experienced music teacher, he secured a position in the court of Prince Archbishop Leopold Anton von Firmian in 1743 as a 4th violinist. By 1763, he had risen to the rank of deputy Kapellmeister. The year Wolfgang was born, Leopold published a violin textbook, Versuch einer Grundlichen Violinschule, which gained widespread recognition. When Nannerl was 7, she began taking keyboard lessons from their father, while Wolfgang, only 3 years old, observed with fascination. Years later, after her brother's passing, she recalled, "He often spent much time at the clavier, picking out thirds, which he was ever striking, and his pleasure showed that it sounded good." In the 4th year of his age, his father, for a game as it were, began to teach him a few minuets and pieces at the clavier. He could play them faultlessly and with the greatest delicacy, keeping exactly in time. At the age of 5, he was already composing little pieces, which he played to his father, who wrote them down. Mozart's earliest compositions, catalogued as K1 to 5, were recorded in the Nannerl Notenbuch. Scholars debate whether he was 4 or 5 when he wrote his first pieces, but it is widely accepted that he composed K1A, 1B, and 1C within a few weeks of each other. Leopold Mozart served as his son's first and only teacher in his early years, instructing both Wolfgang and Nannerl not only in music but also in languages and academics. Biographer Maynard Solomon notes that while Leopold was a dedicated mentor, Wolfgang's talent quickly outgrew his father's instruction. His first ink-stained compositions and early experiments with the violin surprised even Leopold, who eventually stopped composing to focus entirely on nurturing his son's extraordinary abilities. 1762 to 1773, Travels and Musical Development. During his early years, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart embarked on several extensive tours across Europe with his family, showcasing his prodigious talent alongside his sister, Nannerl. These journeys began in 1762 with performances at the court of Prince-Elector Maximilian III of Bavaria in Munich, followed by appearances at the imperial courts of Vienna and Prague. A more ambitious tour followed, lasting over 3.5 years. The family traveled through Munich, Mannheim, Paris, London, Dover, The Hague, Amsterdam, Utrecht, Mechelen, and returned home via Zurich, Donaueschingen, and Munich. Throughout these travels, Mozart encountered numerous musicians and was exposed to the works of leading composers of the time. A particularly influential meeting occurred in London in 1764–65, where he studied with Johann Christian Bach. It was during this time, at just 8 years old, that Mozart composed his first symphony, likely transcribed with his father's assistance. Challenges on the road. The Mozart family's travels were often arduous, with difficult conditions and financial uncertainties. They relied on invitations and payments from aristocratic patrons, which were not always timely or sufficient. Additionally, they faced serious health challenges. Leopold fell gravely ill in London in 1764, and both Wolfgang and Nannerl suffered near-fatal illnesses in The Hague in 1765. In late 1767, the family returned to Vienna, where they remained until December 1768. After spending a year in Salzburg, Leopold and Wolfgang set off for Italy in December 1769, leaving Anna Maria and Nannerl behind. This Italian tour, lasting until March 1771, aimed to further showcase Mozart's skills as both a performer and a rapidly maturing composer. During this period, Mozart met notable figures such as Joseph Myslivsek and Giovanni Battista Martini in Bologna. He was also accepted as a member of the prestigious Accademia Filarmonica. A well-known but debated story suggests that while in Rome, Mozart heard Gregorio Allegri's Miserere performed in the Sistine Chapel and later transcribed it entirely from memory, producing what was allegedly the first unauthorized copy of the closely guarded composition. The accuracy of this account remains uncertain. In Milan, Mozart composed Mithridate, Re di Ponto, 1770, which was successfully staged and led to further opera commissions. He and his father returned to Milan twice more, August–December 1771 and October 1772 to March 1773, for the premieres of Ascanio in Alba, 1771, and Lucio Silla, 1772. Leopold had high hopes of securing a prestigious court position for his son, and while Archduke Ferdinand of Milan showed interest, his mother, Empress Maria Theresa, dismissed the idea, stating she had no use for useless people. As a result, Mozart remained without a formal appointment. During the later stages of this tour, he composed the solo motet Exultate, Jubilati, K.165. 1773–1777, employment at the Salzburg court. After returning from Italy on March 13, 1773, Mozart secured a position as a court musician under Prince Archbishop Hieronymus Colloredo of Salzburg. While living in Salzburg, he composed extensively across various genres, including symphonies, sonatas, string quartets, masses, serenades, and operas. Between April and December 1775, Mozart developed a strong interest in violin concertos, composing 5 in total, the only ones he ever wrote. The last 3, K.216, K.218, and K.219, are now considered masterpieces and remain central to the violin repertoire. In 1776, he shifted his focus to piano concertos, culminating in the E-flat Major Concerto, K.271, 1777, which is widely regarded as a major artistic breakthrough. Despite these accomplishments, Mozart grew increasingly dissatisfied with Salzburg. His annual salary of 150 florins was modest, and opportunities to compose operas, his true passion, were rare. The situation worsened in 1775 when Salzburg's court theater was closed, leaving the city with only a venue primarily used by visiting troops. Seeking better opportunities, Mozart and his father made 2 unsuccessful trips in search of employment, one to Vienna, July–September 1773, and another to Munich, December 1774 to March 1775. However, the Munich visit did lead to the successful premiere of his opera La Finta Giardiniera. 1777–1778, Journey to Paris. In August 1777, Mozart resigned from his position in Salzburg and set out on another journey in search of better opportunities. Accompanied by his mother, he traveled through Augsburg, Mannheim, Paris, and Munich. While in Mannheim, he became acquainted with members of the city's renowned orchestra, considered the finest in Europe at the time. He also fell in love with Aloysia Weber, a talented young soprano from a musical family. Although he hoped to secure employment in Mannheim, no offers materialized, forcing him to continue his journey. On March 14, 1778, he departed for Paris, where he struggled both professionally and financially. One of his letters from Paris suggests he was considered for an organist position at Versailles, but he had no interest in the role. As his financial difficulties grew, he resorted to pawning valuables. The lowest point of his time in Paris came when his mother fell seriously ill and passed away on July 3, 1778. It is believed that delays in calling a doctor, likely due to a lack of funds, contributed to her death. During Mozart's stay in Paris, his father worked behind the scenes to secure him a position back in Salzburg. With the support of local nobility, Mozart was offered the role of court organist and concertmaster with an annual salary of 450 florins. Though reluctant, he eventually returned to Salzburg on January 15, 1779. Before leaving Paris, he distanced himself from his former patron, Melchior Grimm, and stayed briefly in Strasbourg, Mannheim, and Munich. In Munich, he encountered Aloysia Weber again, now a rising opera star, but she had lost interest in him. Despite his personal struggles, Mozart composed several significant works during his Paris journey, including the A minor piano sonata, K 310/300D, the Paris Symphony, No. 31, performed in June 1778, and the Concerto for Flute and Harp in C major, K 299/297C. 1781, break with Salzburg and move to Vienna. In January 1781, Mozart's opera Idomeneo premiered in Munich to great acclaim. Shortly after, he was summoned to Vienna by Archbishop Colloredo, who was attending celebrations for Emperor Joseph II's accession. Though Mozart hoped this would be a chance to further his career, the Archbishop treated him as a mere servant, going as far as making him dine with the valets and cooks. Eager to make a name for himself, Mozart wrote to his father about his ambitions in Vienna. "My main goal right now is to meet the emperor in some agreeable fashion. I am absolutely determined he should get to know me. I would be so happy if I could perform my opera for him and then play a fugue or two, for that's what he likes." Mozart soon had the opportunity to meet Emperor Joseph II, who would later become an important patron. He also planned to perform as a soloist in the prestigious Tonkünstler Societät concerts, an opportunity initially opposed by Colloredo but eventually permitted due to pressure from the nobility. However, tensions between Mozart and the Archbishop escalated when Colloredo repeatedly blocked his opportunities to perform outside his official duties. One such instance was when Mozart was denied the chance to perform for the emperor at Countess Thun's residence for a fee equal to half his annual Salzburg salary. Frustrated, Mozart attempted to resign in May 1781, but his request was refused. The conflict reached its breaking point in June, when his resignation was finally accepted in the most humiliating manner. He was literally dismissed, with a kick in the arse, by the Archbishop's steward, Count Arco. With no ties left to Salzburg, Mozart made a bold decision. He would stay in Vienna as an independent composer and performer. His father, however, was deeply opposed to this choice and urged him to return to Salzburg. In a heated exchange of letters, Mozart passionately defended his decision to pursue his own path. His official dismissal from the Archbishop's service marked a turning point in his life, one that biographer Solomon describes as a revolutionary step that changed his destiny. Early years in Vienna, 1781 to 1787. Establishing a career in Vienna. Mozart's new career in Vienna began with great promise. He quickly gained recognition as a brilliant pianist and composer. One of his most notable early performances was a competition against Muzio Clementi before Emperor Joseph II on December 24, 1781. His virtuosity on the keyboard was widely praised, and he soon established himself as the finest pianist in Vienna. In 1782, Mozart completed Die Entführung aus dem Serail, The Abduction from the Seraglio, a Singspiel that premiered on July 16, 1782. The opera was a resounding success and was soon performed across German-speaking Europe, solidifying Mozart's reputation as a composer of exceptional talent. Marriage and family. During his early years in Vienna, Mozart lived with the Weber family, who had moved from Mannheim following the death of the father, Fridolin Weber. The family took in lodgers to support themselves. Although Mozart had previously courted Aloysia Weber, who later married the actor and painter Joseph Lang, his interest shifted to her younger sister, Constanze. Their relationship, however, was not without challenges. In April 1782, they briefly separated due to a disagreement. Constanze had allowed another man to measure her calves during a parlor game, provoking Mozart's jealousy. Mozart's biggest struggle was obtaining his father's approval for the marriage. In a letter dated July 31, 1782, Mozart expressed his frustration. All the good and well-intentioned advice you have sent fails to address the case of a man who has already gone so far with a maiden. Further postponement is out of the question. Tensions escalated when Constanza's mother allegedly threatened to involve the police if her daughter did not return home. In response, Mozart considered an immediate wedding to prevent further interference. On August 4, 1782, the couple married at St. Stephen's Cathedral, ironically, the day before Leopold Mozart's letter granting his consent arrived. Their marriage contract stipulated that Constanze would contribute 500 gulden to the union, with Mozart promising to add 1,000 more. All jointly acquired assets would remain common property. The couple had 6 children, though only 2 survived infancy. Raymond Leopold, June 17 to August 19, 1783. Carl Thomas Mozart, September 21, 1784 to October 31, 1858. Johann Thomas Leopold, October 18 to November 15, 1786. Teresa Constantia Adelheid Friederich Maria Anna, December 27, 1787 to June 29, 1788. Anna Maria, died shortly after birth, November 16, 1789. Franz Xaver Wolfgang Mozart, July 26, 1791 to July 29, 1844. Musical and professional development, 1782 to 1787. Mozart's exposure to the works of Johann Sebastian Bach and George Friedrich Handel in 1782 and 1783, facilitated by the influential patron Gottfried van Swieten, had a profound impact on his compositions. His studies of Baroque counterpoint led to fugal passages in later works, such as Die Zauberflöte, The Magic Flute, and the finale of Symphony No. 41, Jupiter. In 1783, Mozart and Constanze visited Salzburg. His father and sister were polite but distant toward Constanze. Despite the tension, the trip inspired one of Mozart's greatest liturgical compositions, the Mass in C minor, which premiered in Salzburg, featuring Constanze as a soloist. Friendship with Haydn. Around 1784, Mozart met Joseph Haydn, and the two formed a close friendship. They occasionally played together in informal string quartets. Between 1782 and 1785, Mozart composed 6 string quartets, K387, K421, K428, K458, K464, and K465, in response to Haydn's Opus 33 set from 1781. Haydn held Mozart in the highest regard, writing, "Posterity will not see such a talent again in 100 years." In 1785, he further praised Mozart to Leopold. "I tell you before God, and as an honest man, your son is the greatest composer known to me by person and repute. He has taste, and what is more, the greatest skill in composition." Public concerts and financial success. Between 1782 and 1785, Mozart organized a series of concerts where he performed as a soloist, premiering 3 or 4 new piano concertos each season. Due to limited space in traditional venues, he rented unconventional locations such as the Trattnerhof apartment complex and the Melgrube restaurant's ballroom. These concerts were highly successful, and many of Mozart's piano concertos from this period remain staples of the repertoire. His growing fame and income allowed him and Constanze to adopt a more lavish lifestyle. They moved into a spacious apartment with an annual rent of 460 florins, purchased an elegant forte piano from Anton Walter for about 900 florins, and even bought a billiard table for around 300 florins. Their son Carl Thomas was enrolled in an expensive boarding school, and the family hired servants. Despite their high earnings, Mozart saved little, a pattern that would later contribute to financial struggles. Mozart and Freemasonry. On December 14, 1784, Mozart was initiated into the Freemason Lodge zur Wohltätigkeit, Beneficence. Freemasonry became a significant part of his life, and he remained an active member until his death. Many of his closest friends were Masons, and he composed several works for Masonic ceremonies, including the Moorish Trauermusik, Masonic funeral music. Conclusion. Between 1781 and 1787, Mozart firmly established himself as one of Vienna's leading musicians. His reputation as a composer, performer, and innovator grew rapidly. He enjoyed financial success, moved in elite circles, and developed friendships with figures like Haydn. However, despite his growing wealth, his financial habits foreshadowed difficulties to come. His stylistic evolution, particularly his incorporation of Baroque counterpoint and complex harmonic structures, set the stage for his most profound works in the final years of his life. 1786 to 1787, Return to Opera. Following the success of Die Entführung aus dem Serail, Mozart composed little for the opera stage over the next 4 years. Apart from 2 unfinished works and the one-act Der Schauspieldirektor, his focus remained on his career as a piano soloist and composer of concertos. However, by late 1785, he shifted his attention away from keyboard compositions and embarked on what would become one of his most celebrated operatic collaborations, with librettist Lorenzo da Ponte. The year 1786 marked the premiere of Le Nozze di Figaro, The Marriage of Figaro, in Vienna. While its reception in the city was mixed, the opera was met with enthusiastic acclaim in Prague later that year. This success led to a second collaboration with da Ponte, resulting in the opera Don Giovanni. The work premiered in Prague in October 1787 to great admiration but received a more lukewarm response in Vienna the following year. Both operas are now considered among Mozart's greatest masterpieces, though their musical complexity initially proved challenging for both performers and audiences. These milestones in Mozart's career were shadowed by a personal loss. His father, Leopold Mozart, passed away on May 28, 1787, and thus never witnessed his son's rising operatic success. That same year, Mozart secured a steady income when Emperor Joseph II appointed him as chamber composer, filling the position left vacant by the death of Christoph Willibald Gluck. The post, though part-time, paid 800 florins per year and primarily required him to compose dances for court balls held at the Redetensel. While this was a relatively modest salary, it became increasingly valuable as Mozart's financial difficulties worsened. Records suggest that Joseph II appointed Mozart partly to prevent him from leaving Vienna in search of better opportunities. In 1787, the young Ludwig van Beethoven traveled to Vienna, hoping to study under Mozart. However, there are no reliable records confirming whether the two composers ever met. 1788 to 1790, financial struggles and declining fortunes. By the late 1780s, Mozart's financial and professional situation deteriorated significantly. Around 1786, he stopped performing frequently in public concerts, leading to a steep decline in his income. Vienna's economy was also suffering due to the Austro-Turkish War, 1788 to 1791, which reduced the aristocracy's ability to support musicians. By 1788, Mozart's income had declined by 66% compared to his peak earnings in 1781. In mid-1788, Mozart and his family moved from central Vienna to the suburb of Alsergrund. While some suggest this move was an attempt to cut expenses, Mozart's own letters to Michael von Puchberg indicate that he had not reduced costs but instead secured a larger living space. This period saw Mozart relying heavily on loans, frequently writing pleading letters to Puchberg, who was a fellow Freemason and patron. His financial troubles, coupled with a decline in productivity, have led scholars such as Maynard Solomon to speculate that Mozart may have suffered from depression. Despite these struggles, Mozart produced some of his most remarkable works during this time, including the last 3 symphonies, numbers 39, 40, and 41, composed in the summer of 1788. Così fan tutte, the third and final of his da Ponte operas, premiered in 1790. In an effort to restore his finances, Mozart undertook several journeys across Germany. In the spring of 1789, he visited Leipzig, Dresden, and Berlin. In 1790, he traveled to Frankfurt, Mannheim, and other cities. These trips, however, did not significantly improve his fortunes, and he remained in financial distress as he entered the final years of his life. 1791, Mozart's final year. Mozart's last year was marked by extraordinary productivity and, according to some accounts, a period of personal recovery. During this time, he composed several of his most celebrated works, including the Magic Flute, Die Zauberflöte. His final piano concerto, K595 in B major. The Clarinet Concerto, K622. His last string quintet, K614 in E major. The motet Ave Verum Corpus, K618. The unfinished Requiem, K626. After years of financial hardship, Mozart's finances improved in 1791. Though evidence remains inconclusive, he likely received annuities from wealthy patrons in Hungary and Amsterdam in exchange for occasional compositions. Additionally, his role as imperial chamber composer provided income from the sale of dance music. Unlike in previous years, Mozart no longer borrowed large sums from his friend Michael von Puchberg and had even begun to repay his debts. Mozart also found great satisfaction in the public success of some of his works, particularly the Magic Flute, which was performed numerous times between its premiere and his death. Another notable success was the Little Masonic Cantata, K. 623, which premiered on November 17, 1791. Final illness and death. On September 6, 1791, while in Prague for the premiere of La Clemenza di Tito, Mozart fell ill. This opera, commissioned for Emperor Leopold II's coronation, had been completed in a matter of weeks earlier that year. Despite his illness, he continued working and personally conducted the premiere of the Magic Flute on September 30th. By November 20th, Mozart's health had severely declined. He became bedridden, suffering from swelling, severe pain, and vomiting. He was cared for by his wife Constanze, her youngest sister, and the family doctor, Thomas Franz Closet. In his final days, Mozart remained mentally engaged, attempting to complete his Requiem, although evidence suggests he dictated only minimal portions to his student Franz Xaver Sussmayr. Mozart died at 12:55 a.m. on December 5, 1791, at the age of 35. His funeral was modest, in line with Viennese burial customs at the time. He was interred in a common grave at St. Mark's Cemetery outside the city on December 7. The term common grave does not mean a pauper's grave but rather an individual burial plot for non-aristocrats, subject to excavation after 10 years. Later accounts falsely claimed that Mozart's funeral was unattended and took place during a stormy, snowy night. In reality, the day was calm and mild. Though his funeral was simple, his posthumous reputation soared. In Vienna and Prague, memorial concerts were well attended, and an unprecedented wave of enthusiasm followed his death. Early biographies by Schlichtergroll, Niemetschek, and Niesen helped cement his legacy, and publishers competed to produce complete editions of his works. The exact cause of Mozart's death remains uncertain. His official death record lists severe miliary fever, a vague term describing a rash-like illness. Over the years, more than 100 possible causes have been proposed, including rheumatic fever, streptococcal infection, trichinosis, from undercooked pork, influenza, kidney disease, mercury poisoning. Despite numerous theories, no definitive diagnosis has been proven. Mozart's appearance and personality. Mozart was described as small and thin, with a pale complexion and large, expressive eyes. His face was pitted from a childhood case of smallpox. Tenor Michael Kelly recalled him as a remarkably small man, very thin and pale, with a profusion of fine, fair hair, of which he was rather vain. His voice was described by his wife Constanze as a tenor, rather soft in speaking and delicate in singing, but when excited, it became both powerful and energetic. Mozart had a flair for fashion, often dressing in elegant clothing. He was remembered wearing a crimson pelisse and gold-laced cocked hat while directing music. Portraits of him typically show him wearing a white wig, which was customary for formal occasions. Lifestyle and interests. Mozart was highly social and playful. He had a sharp sense of humor, often indulging in scatological jokes, which appear in letters to his cousin Maria Anna Thekla Mozart and other family members. He also wrote humorous canons featuring crude lyrics, which he sang with friends. He was an avid billiards player, enjoyed dancing, and kept various pets, including a canary, a starling, a dog, a horse, for recreational riding. Having traveled extensively as a child, Mozart was multilingual, speaking Latin, Italian, and French fluently, in addition to his native German. He may have understood some English, as he once jokingly wrote, "You are an ass," on a student's exercise paper. Mozart's faith and Freemasonry. Mozart was raised a Catholic and remained devout throughout his life. He also embraced Freemasonry, joining a lodge in 1784. His Masonic beliefs influenced several compositions, including the Magic Flute, which contains Masonic symbolism and themes of enlightenment. Works, musical style, and innovations. Mozart's musical style and influence. Mozart's music is considered a perfect representation of the classical style, much like the works of Joseph Haydn. During his early years, European music was dominated by the style Galant, which emphasized simplicity and elegance as a reaction against the complex and ornamented Baroque style. However, Mozart played a key role in reintroducing counterpoint, a major feature of Baroque music, but in a more structured and refined way, suited to the evolving tastes of his time. As a highly versatile composer, Mozart worked in nearly every major genre of his era, including symphonies, operas, concertos for various instruments, chamber music, string quartets and quintets, piano sonatas, sacred music, masses and motets, lighter forms like dances, divertimenti, and serenades. While these genres were already well established, Mozart elevated their technical and emotional depth. His innovations were particularly groundbreaking in the development of the classical piano concerto, which he refined and helped popularize. Characteristics of Mozart's music. Mozart's music is known for its clarity, balance, and structural precision. However, beyond its elegant surface, his finest compositions reveal deep emotional intensity and dramatic expression. Some of his most powerful works include Piano Concerto No. 24 in C minor, K. 491. Symphony No. 40 in G minor, K. 550. The opera Don Giovanni. Musicologist Charles Rosen described Mozart's compositions as a unique combination of beauty and intensity, stating that his greatest works contain elements of sensuality and terror, giving them a strikingly emotional and powerful quality. In his later years, Mozart explored chromatic harmony more frequently, as seen in his string quartet in C major, K. 465, also known as the Dissonance Quartet. This piece begins with a highly unusual and suspenseful introduction, showcasing Mozart's bold harmonic language. Musical influences and evolution. Mozart had a rare ability to absorb and adapt musical influences from various cultures and composers. His extensive travels across Europe allowed him to refine his style by studying different traditions. London, he met Johann Christian Bach, whose music influenced his early symphonies. Paris, Mannheim, and Vienna, he encountered new musical techniques and learned from the Mannheim Orchestra, which was famous for its dynamic effects. Italy, he studied Italian opera, particularly opera buffa and the Italian overture, which shaped his own operatic compositions. Mozart was also influenced by the Galant style, which was popular in London and Italy. This style emphasized simple melodies, symmetrical phrases, and clear harmonic progressions. Many of his early symphonies reflect these traits, some resembling Italian overtures, with 3 interconnected movements. Others show the influence of J.C. Bach, while some adopt the rounded binary forms favored by Viennese composers. As he matured, Mozart began incorporating Baroque techniques into his music. Examples include Symphony No. 29 in A major, K. 201, features contrapuntal, polyphonic themes and irregular phrasing. String quartets from 1773, some contain fugal finales, a technique he likely borrowed from Haydn's Opus 20 quartets. Mozart also experimented with the dramatic Sturm und Drang, storm and stress, style, which was an early precursor to Romanticism. His Symphony No. 25 in G minor, K. 183, is a notable example, filled with bold contrasts and emotional intensity. Mozart's mastery of opera and instrumental music. Throughout his career, Mozart alternated between writing operas and instrumental music, refining techniques from one genre and applying them to another. He composed operas in all major styles of his time. Opera buffa, comic opera, L'Unace di Figaro, Don Giovanni, Così fan tutte. Opera seria, serious opera, Idomeneo. Singspiel, German opera with spoken dialogue, Die Zauberflöte. In his later operas, Mozart developed a sophisticated use of orchestration to enhance emotional depth and highlight dramatic moments. His ability to integrate orchestral techniques from symphonies and concertos into his operas resulted in a new level of expressive storytelling. In turn, the rich emotional language of his operatic writing influenced his instrumental compositions, creating a seamless fusion between drama and music. The Köchel Catalogue, organizing Mozart's works. Due to the vast number of compositions Mozart created, Ludwig von Köchel compiled the Köchel Catalogue in 1862, assigning each work a unique chronological number. This system, still in use today, allows Mozart's compositions to be referenced using K or KV followed by their Köchel number, e.g., Symphony No. 40, K. 550. The catalogue has been revised multiple times to reflect updated research on Mozart's works and their authenticity. Instruments. Mozart's early compositions were primarily written for the harpsichord, but he was introduced to the forte piano at a young age, particularly the instruments made by Franz Jacob Spath from Regensburg. During a visit to Augsburg, he encountered Stein forte pianos, which left a strong impression on him. In a letter to his father, he praised Stein's instruments for their superior tone and craftsmanship. On October 22, 1777, Mozart premiered his triple piano concerto, K242, using Stein's forte pianos. The performance featured three pianists, Demmler, Augsburg cathedral organist, on the first piano, Mozart on the second, and Stein on the third. Later, in 1783, after settling in Vienna, Mozart purchased a forte piano built by Anton Walter, which became his preferred instrument. His father, Leopold Mozart, noted how often the instrument was moved from place to place, emphasizing Mozart's deep attachment to it. It is impossible to describe the hustle and bustle. Your brother's pianoforte has been moved at least 12 times from his house to the theater or to someone else's house. Influence. Mozart's impact on later composers. Mozart's music profoundly influenced later generations of composers, shaping the course of classical and romantic music. His compositions became essential study material for musicians, and his legacy grew significantly after his death. One of Mozart's most famous students was Johann Nepomuk Hummel, a composer who bridged the classical and romantic styles. Hummel lived with the Mozart family in Vienna for 2 years as a child, receiving direct instruction from the master himself. Influence on Beethoven. Among those deeply influenced by Mozart was Ludwig van Beethoven, who was 15 years younger. As a teenager, Beethoven studied Mozart's works and is believed to have performed his operas while playing in the Bonn Court Orchestra. In 1787, Beethoven traveled to Vienna, hoping to study with Mozart, though historical evidence of their direct interaction remains uncertain. Beethoven drew inspiration from Mozart's compositions, sometimes using them as models for his own works. One clear example is Beethoven's cadenzas, WV 58, for Mozart's Piano Concerto No. 20 in D minor, K466. Tributes to Mozart by other composers. Mozart's music inspired numerous composers, many of whom wrote variations on his themes as a tribute. Ludwig van Beethoven, 4 sets of variations, including Op. 66 and WV 28, 40, 46. Fernando Sor, Introduction and Variations on a Theme by Mozart, 1821. Mikhail Glinka, Variations on a Theme from Mozart's opera The Magic Flute, 1822. Frédéric Chopin, Variations on La ci darum la mano, from Don Giovanni, 1827. Max Reger, Variations and Fugue on a Theme by Mozart, 1914, based on the variation theme from Piano Sonata K331. Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky, a devoted admirer of Mozart, composed Orchestral Suite No. 4 in G, Mozartiana, 1887, as a tribute to his genius.